Hi, my name is Sarah from Floral, and today I'm going to show you guys how to make a wreath made out of cedar. To start with, we need to gather supplies. Today I have a wire frame, and this has a flat side and more of a rib side, and the flat side goes against your house, and you're going to have your flowers and greenery affixed to this side, which is the rib side. Then I'm going to be using today bind wire. So this is wire that is wrapped with twine. And I like this because it's really flexible and it's super easy to work with. If you don't have bind wire or don't want to use it, you can also use paddle wire. So this one here is 24 gauge and it also will work really well. I'm using it to affix my pine cones, but I'm gonna actually do the arranging with my bind wire. I have here a couple of pine cones that I'm going to use for embellishments. You can grab ribbon if you want to do that. And I also have for my supplies here, I have a pair of pruners and I have a pair of wire cutters. You don't need wire cutters, but it dulls your pruners if you cut the wire with your pruners. So that's why I like to have these wire cutters, just to make sure my pruners last a long time. In terms of supplies here, I'm just going to be using cedar in this wreath, but you can use anything under the sun. I've pre-cut all my cedar pieces here, but I'm going to show you guys to start with what they look like when they are just from a tree. So this is what a cedar bough looks like, and then I'll show you guys how to cut them. So now that we've got all our supplies, we're ready to start. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start making smaller pieces with my big cedar bough. If you are going foraging yourself, you're gonna wanna be a little bit selective in what cedar boughs you choose. You don't want any that are too small, especially if you're doing quite a large wreath. So just kind of pick ones that are around middle size. I'm gonna take my pruners here, and I'm just gonna cut off my pieces of cedar and just add them to the pile here. You need a lot of cedar. This pile here is how much I'm gonna need for this frame here, and this is a lot of cedar. So make sure that you grab enough. All right, now that I've got my cedar put into the pile, I'm ready to start affixing it to my frame. I'm just gonna clear my space here. It's always helpful to have a clean space to work in, just to make sure that you have yourself organized and ready to go. So the principle with wreath making is that you're gonna make a bunch of little bundles, and then you're gonna take these bundles and affix them onto the frame. So no matter what sort of product you're using, it follows the same principles. I'm gonna make a bundle by taking these pieces of cedar that I've pre-cut, and I'm gonna put about 5 into a bundle. When you're making these, try to make every bundle be a similar size and shape so that your wreath looks symmetrical. If you don't know if you've cut enough of this cedar, you can always test it out by just kind of putting it around your wreath frame and just giving yourself an idea of how much you need so that you are ready to start. So the first thing I'm going to do to start is I'm going to take my bind wire and I'm going to attach it here to this frame. So I'm going to do that. There's no fancy way to do it, but I'm just going to knot it here. You want to make sure that it's affixed really well, because this is going to form the foundation of your wreath. We're not going to cut this bind wire at all. We're going to do our wreath using the same continuous piece of wire. So we want to make sure it's really strongly affixed there. I'm going to actually, before I start, put it around the frame a couple times just to make sure I have a nice strong start here. The bind wire is nice because it has elasticity to it, so when you pull it, it gets a little bit tighter here. So I'm gonna start grabbing my little bundle here of cedar, 5 pieces, and I'm gonna lay it down on top of this ridged part of the wreath frame. I lay it down here, just about halfway covering this wire that I've affixed to the frame, making all the edges of the cedar line up. And then I take my bind wire and I wrap it around the cedar. I'm doing this about halfway down the bundle and I'm pulling it nice and tight so that it actually stays nice and affixed to my frame. I'm gonna wrap it around 3 times. My next bundle that I'm gonna make is the same principle, 4 pieces, making sure it resembles the size of the other one closely. And then I'm gonna take this little bundle here, and I want to hide the wire that I previously affixed the first bundle with. So I take this bundle and I put it down just below the first one, but close enough that I'm covering that wire. I then take my bind wire and go around 3 times again, affixing it to the frame. This is the general principle that you use to make this wreath, and you are just gonna keep doing that the whole way around. If you wanted to do something with some juniper or some fir or really any type of greenery that you like, you do the exact same thing, or you can make a combination of a couple different types of greenery. Now we're on to our third bouquet. Made our bundle, slide it down just a little bit from the second bundle, take our bind wire and wrap it around. Every time I do this, I'm just taking a look here to make sure that I can't see any of my previous bind wire. I want to make sure I hide that with my next set of greenery. All right, I've got 3 bundles on. I'm just gonna keep doing that over and over again as I make my way all the way around the wreath. So now that you've got most of your wreath made, I'm gonna show you guys how to just finish it off. The finishing part is a little bit tricky, but don't worry, you've totally got this. So I'm doing the same technique I have been doing for the rest of this wreath. But the difference is that when I attach this bundle of greenery, I'm gonna want to lift up the first bundle and nestle my last bundle underneath it. So that way when I take my first bundle and close it, it covers up my wire underneath it. So I'll show you how I'm going to attach that. So I've got my bundle here. I'm gonna make it just a little bit bigger. And before you commit to wiring it in, you can always just kind of lay it down just to get an eye for what it's gonna look like and whether you like it or not. So I think that looks like a good way to finish it here. So I'm gonna take this bundle and my bind wire, lift up the first bundle, lay down my last bundle, taking my bind wire, I'm going to wire it down. And this is a little bit tricky because you have to make sure you're holding up that first bundle so you can wire underneath it here. Making sure that you pull it tight every time. And because this is the last bundle, we want to make sure it's affixed on there really, really strong. So I'm going to give it a couple extra wraps than I did with all my other bundles. Okay, now that it's on there good, I'm going to cut it. And I'm just going to finish off this tie here. So I'm going to do it on the back side here so you don't see the knot. I'm just going to affix it here to my wreath frame just by a knot. This doesn't have to be anything fancy, just any old knot will do. And just make sure you affix it there tightly. So this one here is my final bunch here, but as you can tell, you can't even hardly tell that that's the last one. If you feel like it's not bulky enough, you can gladly add in another bunch. So do the same thing and just lift up that first bunch if you're feeling like you didn't quite get enough oomph there. Or you can also put pine cones or ribbon or anything just to kind of hide that last little bit there. So now that you've attached all your bundles together, you're gonna have something that looks like this. When you're making your bundles, it's a good idea to make sure all your bundles are a similar size, so that way you have an even distribution around your wreath. You can leave it like this if you want, or you can add in some embellishments. I'm gonna add in a couple pine cones, so I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. So right now I'm gonna grab my wire, and I'm also grab my wire snips, and I'm gonna cut a piece that's about 10 to 12 inches. So right here I have a pine cone, and I'm gonna take my wire and I'm going to feed it through the back side of the pine cone, just tucking it underneath all the little nibs that exist. Once I get around to the center here, I'm just twisting the pine cone 2 or 3 times, and I have the 2 strings here for the pine cone. And then I'm just lifting up the greenery so that I am able to cover my wire. And I'm pulling it around to the back. And at the back here, I'm taking my wire and just twisting it together so that I can affix it onto this wire frame. So I'm just gonna go with 2 pine cones here today on this wreath, so I'm now done. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch and visit ufloral.ca for all your DIY flower needs.